My name is Frank G. Clement, Jr. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee today on May 23, 2003. It's my pleasure to interview Irvin H. Kilcrease, Jr. This is part of the Legal History Project of the Fellows of the Tennessee Bar Foundation. Please state your full name.
My name is Irvin H. Kilcrease, Jr.
What does the H stand for?
The H stands for Hugh.
Hugh.
Yeah.
Is that a family name?
It's a family name. It's my father's name, full name, of course. And I wonder sometime where they got the name Irvin and Hugh, but my grandmother, I never thought to ask my grandmother about that. But I use H, and very few people know that it's a Hugh. H stands for Hugh.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Nashville, Davidson County, Tennessee. I was born at home, 13th Avenue South.
What?
In South Nashville.
What day, month, and year?
November 21st, 1931.
How old are you today?
71. I'll be 72, of course, in November.
You're a young-looking 71. Do you exercise or eat properly?
Well, you're generous. I don't do either one. I don't eat properly, and I don't exercise properly. But I do get exercise, and I try to take the long way to the office and walking, a long way from the parking lot. I do yard work from time to time, and I get exercise that way on Saturdays.
Well, wonderful. We'll talk about your house later. I've seen it, and it's immaculate and makes me feel rather sloppy when I drive by your home. Who were your parents? My
parents were Irvin, of course, Irvin Hugh, and Carrie Dalton. Dalton's her maiden name. She was from Williamson County, Arrington, Tennessee. Yes. And of course, my father was Nashvilleian.
How did they meet?
I'm not altogether sure. I think she was visiting with her sister in Nashville, and I think my father somehow met her at that time.
Who were your paternal grandparents?
William and Annie Kilcrease. William was a Baptist preacher here in Nashville and pastored the Jackson Street Baptist Church in North Nashville. It's a church still in operation now, because my grandmother was from Spring Hill, Tennessee, Murray County, and she was a housewife.
Who were your maternal grandparents?
The Daltons, my Isaac Dalton and Molly Dalton, and they lived in Arrington, Tennessee, and they were farmers.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I have two brothers and two sisters, John Kilcrease, Clarence Kilcrease, Annie Kilcrease, and Laureen Kilcrease.
Do they live in Middle Tennessee?
They all live in Nashville.
Wonderful. Your wife, when and where did you meet her?
I met my wife through a mutual friend. I had a friend who was a school teacher here in Nashville, and my wife taught school at the same school. And she said once she had someone she would like for me to meet. And so I called my wife up, girl called up at that time, and I made a date, and I met her, and I found out that I remember seeing her many times before, but I didn't know her name, and had admired her, but I just didn't know her.
What was her name?
Kathleen Lacey.
Okay. And did she grow up in Nashville?
Yes, her early childhood was in Nashville, and she lived in Murray County for a short period of time, went to high school in Murray County, but came back to Nashville and I went to school at Tennessee State University and Vanderbilt University.
Well, we'll come back to more of meeting this lovely young lady and how that evolved into a lifelong marriage. What was your early childhood like before you started elementary school?
My early childhood was a good experience. I had good parents. They were hardworking people, but we were poor. And I never realized, though, at that time that we were poor. But I soon found out later on that others had things, material things that we didn't have. And more I began to realize that we were poor, but we were not poor from love. We were rich. Our family was closely knit, and love was there, and a lot of encouragement. So I may not have been as poor as I thought.
You were rich with many blessings,
yes.
No doubt. Where were you in the order of birth of the children?
First.
You're the eldest child?
Eldest child.
Okay. Were you therefore the bully of the family?
No, I hope not. No, but I was put in charge really at an early age when both my parents worked at various times. My mother worked at various times, and when she was working outside the home, of course, she would leave me in charge. And my brothers and sisters talk about that now. They said I was a boss, but and they jokingly say that, of course.
Well, they may be joking and they may not be. You
Well,
know,
that's true, too.
How many years separate each of the children?
About a couple of years, maybe.
Okay. So approximately 2 years between each
yes,
of you?
Approximately.
Right. Okay. Where did you go to elementary school?
I started school at Lawrence School on South Street in South Nashville. After maybe a year, I moved to Carter School, and they combined Lawrence School and Carter School on 12th Avenue South. So I went to Lawrence School for maybe a year or so, and then the next few years I went to Carter Law School, which was about 3 blocks away.
So you
it was
went
a new
to
school.
You went to a new building?
Yes, new building.
Right. Many of the same classmates?
Same classmates, yes.
What size were the classes? How many persons were in the class with you?
About 30.
Okay.
Average 30 in a class.
Did you feel that you were receiving a good education at the time in elementary school?
Well, at the time, I did. I think, and it was because of the teachers. The teachers all showed an interest in us, and they were nice people. So there was an environment there for learning, and they tried to do the best they could for us. Obviously, as I said earlier, we were all poor, and the children from the neighborhood were like myself. They were poor too. So given that, and given the fact that we didn't have a lot of equipment, for instance, very seldom we got any new books. We got used books from other schools and damaged books. But the teachers, I think, did a good job with what they had. But many materials that students normally have, we did not have it. The schools didn't provide it for us. And of course, our parents were unable to afford it.
This would be in the 40s, perhaps 44
in
to
the
47.
40s, yes.
Okay. Was this a segregated school system at the time?
It was segregated school system.
As a young person, did you realize or understand that at the time?
No, I didn't. I didn't understand that there was a difference at that time. My parents never discussed that with us, never told us that what was on the outside of our neighborhood. We never got outside the neighborhood, and so we didn't know. The first time I realized that race was a factor was my father sent me about 3 blocks away to a drugstore one time, a pharmacy, to get a prescription filled. And while I was waiting to get the prescription filled, I saw a person buy a glass of Coca-Cola. And so while I was waiting around, and it was unusual because I had a nickel, a dime in my pocket, which I didn't ever have. But so, for some reason, I had it, and I went to the counter and asked to buy a Coca-Cola, a glass of Coca-Cola while I was waiting. And the pharmacist told me that you can't get that. You can't get that here. So you have to go, I think he said on 12th Avenue. Well, 12th Avenue was 1 block from where I lived. And I began to think about it. It troubled me, but I didn't talk to my parents about it. I just thought about it for a long time. And then I began to look for things then that let me know that there was a difference, that my color did make a difference. But the fact that my parents never taught us, meaning my sisters and brothers, about race or to make a difference. So it took us longer to learn about what society was like as black and white than I think most people. My grandfather, as I mentioned, was a Baptist preacher. So they always taught the Bible principles and never talked about other people in a negative manner.
And I assume, being the 40s, I believe that was even before network television or even before television. I assume you didn't have a TV in the home.
No, as I recall, the televisions came out about 1946, 47 in Nashville. And we didn't have a television until maybe early 50s. And the reason I say that, I remember when we did get one, children in the neighborhood would heard about it, and they would come to our house at night to watch television. Sometimes you would see all these people sitting on the floor, kids sitting on the floor watching television, and you really didn't know who some of them were. But that's, of course, the neighbors were close that way. If whatever one neighbor had, the other one had it, and if you were lacking something and they had it, they shared with you.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds like you were fortunate to have a family that was able to have a TV at the very early stages.
Well, my father was a person who was, I would say, a dedicated father. He would do almost anything to sacrifice. He'd make any kind of sacrifice for himself so that we could have something. And television, one of it, he had to sacrifice. I know because his job didn't pay that much money. I can remember the time that he bought a bicycle for Christmas, only one, and of course there were two of us then, because I had another brother later on, and we had to share that bike, but we did get a bike for Christmas. And how he did it, I don't know. Saved his money, I guess.
I bet you were thrilled to have that bicycle, share or not.
Oh, I was. That's right.
You left Carter Lawrence Elementary School, and where did you go to junior high school?
Well, I left Carter Lawrence before I was scheduled to leave because the school was overcrowded. And when they built the school, it wasn't large enough. So they had then low grades, half grades, I was in the low 6. Well, when I completed the low 6, instead of going to the high 6 at Carter Lawrence, they sent me to Cameron School. And Cameron School had an elementary and a junior high school. And then I finished 6th grade at Cameron School, then I went just down the hall and started junior high school in the 7th grade.
Where was Cameron Junior High School?
Cameron was on Lafayette Street in South Nashville, and it was about, I guess, 2 miles, 1.5 miles from where I lived. And I passed schools that were white schools to get to Cameron School. But it never occurred to me at that point, really, what was going on. I just see the school, and we'd cross some children, the white children would be going in one direction, and we would be going in the other direction, passing on the sidewalk. But it never occurred to me I was passing a school with the same grade, that had the same grade.
How did you get to school?
Walked. We walked to school, and we could walk or we could get school tokens, but you had to buy them. And they were like 3 or 4 cents each. And we couldn't afford it every day, so we walked unless it was raining. And sometimes we would have some tokens, but we never used them until we had a rainy day.
So aside from the few occasions that there might be rain, you literally walk to and from school every day,
every
2
day.
miles each way.
That's right, about from 12th Avenue and in South Nashville over to Lafayette Street, and that was in South Nashville too.
You would pass what we call Franklin Road or 8th Avenue.
That's right, we would cross 8th Avenue, and then we did a lot of shortcuts as kids. We
cut across the railroad tracks too.
Railroad, that's true. We had to cross railroad tracks, and we have to go by the cemetery. Never forget that, because
as a young person, that would be scary, wouldn't it?
Well, we always talked about it as we passed the cemetery.
What's the name of the road by Greer Stadium? Is it not Foster?
Chestnut Street.
Would you come through Chestnut?
Yes, we would, many times. Sometimes we would come through Chestnut.
Mm-hmm. And that's just a little south of that old cemetery.
That's right, it is.
What was Cameron Junior High like? What was your experience like for those 3 years?
I think I had a good experience at Cameron. The principal there was an older gentleman who had been a principal for many years. And
what was his name?
His name was Johnson. And one of the schools, Johnson Elementary School, is not far from Cameron, is named for him. But he was a person who didn't have to say anything, but you knew that you had to do things that were proper. He demanded so much respect without talking. And we stayed away from the principal because we always felt guilty that we were maybe doing something, but he never talked much to us, but we had a lot of respect for him. And he ran a good school. And the teachers were dedicated teachers. If you did not show up for class, teacher would ask others in the class if you were present that day. If they said that they saw you that morning, the teacher would leave and go find you. They knew where to find you and bring you to class. Of course, they'd pal you first, and then you would come marching in class, and you'd be very embarrassed because you knew that your fellow students knew what had happened to you.
Did that ever happen to Irvin H. Kilcrease, Jr.?
No, strangely enough, and I have to say this truthfully, I did not miss class. I always liked to be in class. Now, the trouble I got into in school was talking to my fellow classmates. Now, I talked to the ones in front and on the side and the one in the back too. And the teachers then all had paddles, and of course they would ask me to step outside in the hallway and give me some few licks on the hand, and then I'd come back and I'd be a little embarrassed, but then I was quiet for a while after.
At least until the next day.
That's right, until the next day.
Did they paddle your hand instead of your bottom at that time?
Yes, they paddled the hand. And they were like, now that I look back, they were really love licks because they didn't hit us hard in it, and they were nice after that. They never, you couldn't tell a few minutes later if you'd been in any trouble.
Did you ever get spanked at home or paddled at home?
Oh yes, I got spanked at home because for some different reasons, where there was some kind of, where I disobeyed some way, I got into trouble. But I didn't get, looking back, I didn't get as many spankings as I probably needed. Because it seems that my parents, I only got them when it seemed like it was just necessary, that maybe I had a warning and I didn't do what I was told to do, and then, because I got a spanking for it. But looking back, I didn't get that many.
I bet you were a respectful son, but probably rambunctious at times.
That's true. I respected my parents, I didn't want to do anything that would make them unhappy with me. And sometimes I step out of line, but that was the main thing that stayed with me, that I didn't like to do things that would make them unhappy.
Do you recall an incident that caused you to get a spanking?
I can't think of any now. It's been so long ago.
It's probably best that you put it out of your mind.
Yes.
Did your father ever tell you to go get a switch and break off a stick so he could spank you, or would he use something around the house?
No, my father did not. My father worked 2 jobs all the time, so he was not at home that much. And my mother was the one that disciplined us, and she would send us to get a switch, and that was an awful trip to go get one and then have to bring it back, hand it to her so she could spank you with it.
Pearl High School. I believe you were there from 1947 to 1950.
I was.
Tell us about Pearl.
Well, Pearl was quite a distance from where I lived, but Pearl was the only high school in Nashville for blacks in the city. Now, there was a high school in the county, Haynes High School, but if you lived in the city, you had to go to Pearl High no matter where you lived. So I lived in South Nashville, and so we'd have to walk. And sometimes, as I said before, we had tokens. You could get tokens if you could afford them. And Pearl High was a good experience. Had good teachers there, and I think I probably learned more at Pearl High as far as preparation for college and probably any other school. I enjoyed being there, but I always had some kind of a job in the afternoons, doing something, working at the grocery store, bagging groceries, or cleaning up for somebody. So I didn't participate in the extracurricular activities. As soon as I was out of school, it was time for me to be at work, and then of course I had to walk back to South Nashville, and I always worked at a store in South Nashville, not too far from where I lived.
How far was your walk from home to Pearl High?
It was probably a mile, maybe, a little more.
Not as far as Cameron, but still.
No, not as far as.
But still a long walk.
Still a long walk, yes.
And you would have to cross over Broadway, West End, and Church Street,
That's
and even
right.
Charlotte to get there.
That's right. And it was on, Pearl High was at Joe Johnston.
Were there, you were a very young person, were there any security guards or school guards to protect you as you walked across the streets?
No, we didn't. There were no school guards until we got to Pearl High, and there was some at Pearl High at the corner. But no, from my house until Pearl High, we didn't have any kind of security or safety patrols at the intersection.
So you crossed 3 major thoroughfares every day, twice a day.
Every day.
Without protection as
That's
a
true.
young man.
And many times, well, not many times, but sometimes it was raining, snowing, and it didn't make any difference. We still went to school every day. And my mother insisted that we go to school. And you couldn't get out of going to school. I tried it once, and I told my mother that I was sick that day and that I did not want to go to school. So she said, she was smarter than anybody I've ever seen. She said, all right, you can stay at home, but then you can't go out of doors. So with that, I got well in a hurry. And
you learned what house arrest was real quick.
I got better, and then I went on to school.
So that was a one-day experience.
That's right. That's the only time I attempted to stay home.
Were there some teachers or subjects at Pearl High School that remain important in your life?
Yes, one English did. There was an English teacher there, and she always taught us how to. One project was we had to had to do a newspaper, the whole thing, the comic strip and all. And we worked on it as a project. And then we had to do writings, write short stories, things like that. And I thought that was, now that I'm in the law, that was very, very helpful.
What was this teacher's name?
Freeman. Her name was Freeman, and she is since deceased.
Who was the principal at Pearl?
Mr. Galloway, J.A. Galloway was a principal the whole time that I was there.
He's somewhat legendary in Nashville education, isn't he?
He is, and his family. His daughter was teaching there health and physical education at the school too.
Were you a good student academically?
I thought so, and my grades, I was surprised that they were as good as they were. I could have probably been a better student, but I was, as I said before, I was always working in the afternoons, and but they tell me that I was a pretty good student.
Did you know any lawyers during your high school and earlier years?
No, I didn't know any lawyers during the high school years. I heard of some lawyers, one or two lawyers, and one of them was Z. Alexander Luby, who was very active at that time. And there was another one, W.D. Hawkins, but he was not, I don't think he was in full-time practice, but he was worked at Fisk University in some position. And during high school, that was about it. And then later years, I learned about 2 or 3 other lawyers. Avon Williams was one later on. J.F. McClellan was another one, and 1 or 2 others. But those were the active practitioners then, about, I would think, maybe 3 or 4, and then Robert Lillard, who was a city councilman and practiced law for a number of years.
And was a circuit court judge in Nashville.
That's right, he was.
Mm-hmm. While in high school, were you contemplating or dreaming of any particular career as a future?
I was. At an early age, I decided that I wanted to become a dentist. And that was the only thing I ever thought about. And when I went to high school, I'd ask teachers about it. I told the teachers that's what my career plans were. And I can recall I got in high school, took Latin, because I heard the doctors had to know Latin. And so I took Latin, and after I got into it, I thought it was a big mistake. But so I went over to the assistant principal and told him that after the first year, they said I had to have 2 years. I heard it later. So I went over to talk to the assistant principal about it and told him that I'd like to get out of that class, that I'd already had 1 year of it. He told me I could not get out of it. They had to take a second year. So I did. So I had 2 years of Latin. So I think that's was a lesson to me about doing things without having some kind of counseling or getting advice from someone about it, just on my own. But I always wanted to become a dentist. And then when I was in the 11th grade in high school, I got in a program, a vocational program. And I got to go to a dental laboratory each day. I went to school in the morning. I took 3 subjects in mornings. And then the remainder of the day, I went to a dental laboratory about 3 blocks from school and trained in this laboratory during my 11th and 12th grade, 2 years. And it was a great experience.
You received class credit for doing that.
I did. I received.
Was that called a co-op program?
It was
back then?
Yes, it was similar to a co-op program, and I received credit for it. Then when I went to college, I took a pre-dental, a pre-med. It was a dental and med course together for 2 years for dental school. And but at the end of my second year of college, the Korean War was in, they called it a conflict. I call it a war. But anyway.
It's a conflict if you're in the United States. It's a war if you're in Korea.
Exactly. I didn't go to Korea, but I got drafted during that summer. And so I stayed in the Army 2 years.
Well, before we get to Korea, let's go back to high school a little more. You were very pleased with your English teacher and what she did for you. You were excited about the dental studies after school. Anything else going on during your high school years that you believe is important to the formulation of the Irvin H. Kilcrease Jr. of today?
Well, I think that the other teachers in the school, the subjects, were teachers that were always encouraging you to do something, to achieve, and almost without exception. They were like that, and so I think that sort of gave me the push I needed to pursue the things that I had already planned before I ever got to high school. And so I had a good high school career, I think. As I said, I didn't participate in any extracurricular activities because I was always rushing out of school to get to my evening job, which I thought was very important at that time.
You graduated from Pearl High School in 1950.
Well, yeah, I did in 1950, but I got out, I finished earlier than that. I finished really in February of 1950, but I got a diploma in June of 1950. I had enough credits. I'd been taking more classes than normal, and the normally that you would take, and so I finished all my credits in February of 1950, and then graduated in June 1950.
Did you attend class in March, April, and May?
No, I didn't. I didn't have to go to school.
Okay. You were working, you mentioned at grocery stores and other places. Where were some of the places that you worked while in high school, after school?
Well, I worked, my great aunt had a small restaurant on 12th Avenue South.
What was her name?
And her name was Janetta Cole, and her husband. It was a husband and wife type small restaurant. Well, I would work there sometime with them, and then on the corner.
What was the name of the restaurant?
It was called Cole's Barbecue. That's what it was called. Okay. And they had a barbecue pit in the yard, and never will forget it. And that was really the specialty, was pit barbecue. And then down on the corner from where that restaurant was located was a grocery store. And I worked for a man there. His name was Austin Henderson. And we've kept in touch over the years. So I worked there as a sack boy until I was 16. And he carried me to the Department of Safety and got a driver's license for me so I could deliver groceries in his car. And so I've had a driver's license for many, many years. And because he passed away last year, but we always kept in touch.
What was the name of his grocery?
It was, I think it may have been Henderson's Market. I'm not sure. Oh, Hilo, I think it was, or Ballo Market, that's what it was. And they was a small market, small store. And like I said before, I bagged groceries until I was 16, and I'd work in the meat market. And when I got a driver's license, then I would deliver groceries in the neighborhood. I didn't go outside the neighborhood after school.
That's another era that's gone by of the grocery delivering to its regular customers.
Well, that's true. In those days, it was fun for me as a youngster, driving the car, 16 years old. And
I assume it was not your car, but his car.
It was his car.
Did you worry about having insurance or not at the time?
No, I didn't even think about insurance.
Was that also the time where the customers did not have to pay when the groceries were delivered? They would just have an account and they would settle up at a later date?
No, it was all cash.
All cash.
And they didn't have to pay for delivery. Delivery was free, but he had a cash and he called it a cash and carry business.
You carried and they provided
That's right.
the cash. Do you recall how you were paid? How much per hour or per day?
I was paid $6 a week.
And how much did you work for that $6 week?
I worked from about 3:30 every afternoon until the store closed at 7, and then I would work on Saturdays from 7 until 10 o'clock at night.
So 4 times 5 is 20 hours, plus Saturday.
From 7 to 10.
7 in the morning to 10 at night?
That's right.
Oh my goodness. So that's 30-something hours for $6.
$6 a week.
I'm not going to do all the math, but I think that's somewhere near 50 cents an hour. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right.
Do you think it was a pretty good job at the time?
At the time I did, because it was in the neighborhood. I could walk. I lived within about 1 block, or maybe a block and a half from the store, and I didn't know about any higher pay anywhere else. So I thought it was a pretty good salary.
Did you get to keep this money for your use, or did you share it with the family?
I shared it with my parents, and some with my sisters and brothers too sometimes.
So the family worked together to support each
Yes.
other very much.
And of course my brothers worked too. My sisters did not work, but my brothers did work.
You finish your classroom work in February of '50. You graduate in May or June of 1950. How and when did you decide what was next for Irvin Kilcrease?
Well, I knew I wanted to attend college, but when I graduated, I didn't have the money. Same story. And I got a job. I heard about it. Someone told me about a job where a person working there was going to take a 2 weeks vacation, and they were looking for someone to fill his place in 2 weeks. So I went there, and the place was on the corner of 4th and Union downtown, and it was a recording studio, and they produced shows, radio shows, such as the Eddie Allen Show, the Duca Paducah Show, and they had some other shows that were soap operas then on the radio. So I went there and I got the job to work 2 weeks, and I worked in the 3rd week. The man I was working, the person I was working in this place did not come to work, so they asked me to come back from the 3rd week. In the 3rd week, he wasn't there either. So, make a long story short, I ended up working there 2 years, and that way I paid my way through college the first 2 years.
Do you remember the name of this company?
Brown Radio Productions. And
who owned it, or who did you work for?
I worked for the Brown Radio Productions. I didn't work for the artists, no, but they would come there and record these shows, and one of them was Eddie Allen, was the Ralston Perini show, and I worked on his show, and his shows were recorded at the old Maxwell House Hotel, and for audiences, maybe they may make 2 or 3 shows at one time at the hotel, and my job was like a stagehand. I would transport the equipment, sound equipment, and set the stage for the shows. And then my second job was to clean the building up. So I was a janitor one time, and then the other time I was a stagehand.
And the Maxwell House Hotel then was at the corner of 4th and Church, where the Sun Trust building presently stands. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. How would you get to work?
I would ride the bus. I ride Jefferson Street bus to school, and then as soon as school was out, then I would ride the bus back downtown and go to work right across the street from where the bus stop was until maybe for about a year. Then I bought an old car, and then I had transportation.
You worked for a Brown radio production. Eddie Arnold is coming by to perform. Did you realize how big Eddie Arnold was at the time in the industry?
I did. I recognized how big he was in terms of his popularity and his music. And there's one thing he told me that stayed with me. And since I've been on the bench, I've talked with him. Matter of fact, he made a picture for me the first time I ran for this office. But he told me before the show, before he went on stage one night, I don't know how the conversation came up, but he asked me something about school, and I told him I was in school, and he told me to advise me to stay in school. And that was the end of it, and he went on his way and I went on my way. But then I thought about it. I said, somebody of that stature, was just a star, world-renowned person, and he thought education was important, then I'd had to think the same thing, and I thought, there must be something to it. If he thinks, all I thought he had, was well off, and I'm sure he was, that education was important, it was necessary, then I just adopted that. I took that advice. I already thought that anyway, but that just reinforced my belief that education was important.
A couple of years ago, you and I were riding in my car. We were visiting about some of your life experiences. And we both became amused when I was visiting with you about this very experience and said, isn't it a little ironic that country music paid your way to go to college?
That's right, it sure did. Country music actually paid my way for the first 2 years in college. Of course, after I went in the Army, I came out because I had the GI Bill. But that's true. All the people on the Grand Ole Opry, I could say something about, I saw them in the studio while I was working there at night. And
did you like country music at the time?
Well, I thought, I enjoyed, it was interesting to me at night when they were recording the shows and all, and I listened to them, and the talent I thought that they had was really something, and the writing of the songs and all. I thought I admired that in it, and then a lot of people I met, I didn't meet that many personally because they were in and out, and I was just cleaning up the studio. When one leave, I'd clean it up for the next one. But they were kind people. That many of the people who were there that I worked for, I had good experiences.
This is the beginning of this job was in the summer of 1950, and you're trying to find a way to afford college. So this 2-week job turns into the means for college. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
I assume you worked 40-hour a week or more.
I worked more. Many times I worked like 60 hours a week because I was coming in I cleaned up the building. My job was to clean the building. That was my main job. But then the stage work was something I did mostly on Saturdays and Sundays. Sometimes maybe on the weeknight. And if they were recording, making records, one of the record companies, RC Victor Company, would come in at various times and record these artists I just talked about, many of them. And I would stay there then because they would record late. So sometimes I'd work 50 or 60 hours a week. You
applied to go to Tennessee State University.
Yes.
I trust the admission went well, no problems there.
I had no problems.
What was your freshman year like at Tennessee State?
My freshman year was, it was tough, I thought, because the one reason, I took too many courses. I signed up for too many courses, and then working too. So I still had my job, and I was working every night, and I was getting home sometimes at 11 o'clock. I'd catch the last bus at midnight going home sometimes because the recording sessions would keep me there. And then I would work, like I said, a lot of times all day Saturday, and then I would work Sunday afternoons because some of the recorded shows were made at the Maxwell House Hotel on Sunday afternoons. So that really cut into my study. And then I had to be up early in the morning, so I never will forget it. I had 8 o'clock classes every morning. So I had to ride the bus to school, and so I'd have to get up real early in the morning. Plus, I'd stay up to 2 and 3 o'clock getting my work, because after I get home at 10 or 11 sometimes, and very seldom I ever got home before, say, 8 or 9 o'clock. So I stayed up past midnight many nights, but I didn't drop any courses. So I had a tough first year.
Did your grades suffer?
Oh, I think they did to a certain extent. I passed, all right, but I think they suffered because there were times when I just had to stop studying and get 2 or 3 hours sleep.
At this time, are you still interested in a dental career?
No, I've given that up. I think, and looking back, looking over my career as a lawyer and a judge, I think I made the right second choice.
No, I mean, as a freshman in college, were you still interested in a dental career?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Forgive me, my question
yes,
wasn't.
That's what.
Okay.
Yes, I was still in because I was taking a pre-dental course in college. That's what I started out. So I had a lot of heavy subjects, science and math and all. That even made it worse with my job.
Anything significant occurred during your freshman year in college that you believe is substantial in your life?
I don't think so. I detected that I probably got a pretty good high school education based on my college, the work I was able to do in college. It didn't come to me before then, but I think that as I took the courses, the science courses and the math courses, some of the other courses, the English and all that, I probably got a pretty good education, public school education.
Are you still living at home with your parents?
At that time, yes, at that time I was.
Do you go to school during the summer as well, between your freshman and sophomore year?
No, I didn't. I didn't, because I worked. What happened when school ended? When school ended in May, I would start working full time, in the same job, but I would start going in the mornings at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and working until like 5 or 6.
Is your sophomore year a repeat of your freshman year, or are there any major changes?
It was just my sophomore year was more of the same. Because it was more chemistry, more English, just advanced courses. That's what it amounted to, French and other courses.
All right, 1952, you're in your sophomore year or finishing your sophomore year.
I completed my sophomore year.
Does something interrupt your college education?
It did. In the summer of 1952, August, I got the greetings, as they call them, to report for military duty in September. So I did not go back. Of course, I couldn't go back to school for my junior year. So I went to the Army instead.
What lovely location did you first meet the Army?
At Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
I imagine in August in 1952, that was just a lovely place to be.
It was September when I got there. It wasn't a lovely place. It was, and it was the infantry basic training, 4 months of infantry basic training, and it was really it was a challenge, to say the least.
So you stay there for 4 months. Anything significant happen in your life other than a rather abrupt introduction to military life?
I stayed there 4 months, and instead of being transferred out, as you usually do after you finish your basic training, they transfer the troops to different places. I asked to stay because there was an opening for a mail clerk and a troop information officer. And troop information sounds like it's a big position, but it's really taking care of the recreation room, putting in the magazines and keeping everything in order, and also giving out the mail and going to the hospital. There's always someone in the hospital so you go to the hospital and deliver the hospital mail, and you deliver mail twice each day to the troops. They would come in for lunch, and you give the mail out, and then they'd come back for supper, and you give the mail, you pass the mail out.
And to you, that sounded a lot better than being in the infantry in Korea, I imagine.
That's right, and I avoided Korea by taking the job.
Was the military segregated in 1952?
It was not really, because they, at that point, and I heard this, that there was a 1948 act passed, and when President Truman was in, and they had the integrated armed forces, I was told, and I learned more about it because later on I worked in personnel. I got a job in personnel changed from the other job I had, and you had to have 47% minorities and 53% white. And we stayed in the same barracks at that point. But there were other soldiers in the unit, and I talked to them, and they'd been there a while, and they were in the segregated part, and they told us about it. But when I went in 1952, there was that mix percentage. And when I was later on, I went to personnel, left Fort Jackson and went to Fort Eustis, Virginia. Whenever that percentage would change, we'd start shipping people out or bringing some more people in to keep that ratio.
How long did you stay in South Carolina?
1 year.
Okay. Did you were the information officer and then the postal clerk?
Yes.
Or excuse me, personnel. You moved into personnel?
I moved in personnel after I left.
Oh, so,
Yeah.
All right, you leave Carolina, where do you go?
I went to Fort Eustis, Virginia. Mm-hmm. And then I got assigned to the personnel.
What was your experience like in Virginia?
I thought I had a good experience in Virginia. I worked in personnel, as I said before, so it wasn't a real hard job. I wore dress uniform each day, didn't wear any work clothes, and I worked just like any other office job, from about 8 o'clock in the morning till 3:30 or 4, and then I was off.
Sounds like life's easy now compared to working 60 hours a week and going to school full time.
That's right, it was, because I just kept records. I didn't put any clerk type, kept individual records on personnel.
When did you leave the military?
1954.
So you had a 2-year stint.
I had a 2-year active duty, and then I had a 6-year, well, I had an 8-year military obligation under the Act, and I served 2 years active duty. Then I had 6 years of standby reserve, so I didn't get a discharge until all of that 8 years later.
1960.
1960 when I got a discharge, even though I went in 1952.
Did anything happen during your military service that you believe was important in your life, that new experience or whatever?
I think one thing that happened, I was given more responsibility in the military, and I always said I was given an opportunity to use whatever talents I had, management skills, For one time, for a short period of time, I was in charge of the personnel section for a large unit because they had a vacancy. Somebody dropped out, and I was a number 2 person and moved up to the first number 1 person. And I got to manage things, manage records, got to give briefings to officers and all. And I think looking back, it's very helpful. I've always wanted to be able to use whatever talents I had, and that was why I guess I've had so many different jobs. When I got to one, I thought I had done all I could do, and I thought there was something else above that I was capable of doing. Then I tried to move in the next position. And so I've been, if I had to describe myself, I've been a restless person most of my life, my adult life, moving from one degree to the other.
Do you leave the military, at least active duty, in September of '54 and return to Nashville?
That's correct. Yes, I returned to Nashville.
All right. And at that point, do you rejoin your college studies?
Well, I arrived too late to get in to start school in September, but I did start in December of '54.
This is a good point for us to take a short break, and we'll come back and pick up with your junior year in college.
All right.
It is September of 1954. You're in Virginia, concluding 2 years of active military service in the United States Army. You've experienced your first opportunity of leadership and administrative positions. And you're deciding, where do I go now? So what is your decision, and where do you go?
I thought I would return to college and become a teacher, because during the 2 years in the military, I had decided that the military had disrupted my plans. And in my own mind, I thought that 2 years were a long time, and that I was probably too old to go to dental school. And that, of course, that was a wrong thought.
You're 22
incorrect.
years old.
I was about 22 years.
Yeah, that's an old man, no doubt about it.
I thought it was. So I went back to school, and because of the science courses I'd had in the pre-dental curriculum, I majored in biology. And I went there for 2 more years. Went Tennessee State University 2 more years. I didn't graduate, and I stopped school and went to work again. And I went to the U.S. Post Office. And what happened there was I received, after I was discharged, or released from the Army, I received a notice that a civil service examination was being given. And they invited me to take the examination. And I did, and the reason I took the examination was that I really didn't want to become a school teacher. But I only chose biology to save the science credits that I had earned.
So in these 2 years, your last 2 years of college, you changed your mind about being a teacher, and you want to do something else.
Yes, I changed. So I said I would take the examination, civil service examination. If I passed the examination, then I'd give some thought to doing that, working for the post office. Well, I passed the examination and got called sooner than I thought, and was offered a job. And
you're still in school. You're a senior in school.
Still in school. I was a senior. So I decided that I would work during the summer and then decide about going back to school. My plans were to graduate in December. And we're talking about May of the same year. And I worked during the summer, and I made so much money in my mind that I thought I shouldn't quit. I'd never made that much money before. And the people were telling me that what a great job I had. So I said I'd work one more year. Well, the one more year turned out to be 10 years before I left the post office. And I thought it was a great job, and even now, and I enjoyed working there.
What did you make your first year in the Postal Service, and what were you making your last year in the Postal Service?
I really don't remember, but it was because when I went in, I wasn't making very much. I went back to working for the same person at the grocery store. After school, I worked there part-time. And of course, I had the GI Bill when I came out, so it was enough for me to go to college and also to maintain an automobile. But I can't remember what actually I made.
But when you worked at the Postal Service, it was good money at the time.
It was good money at the time. I know that much. Yes, I remember that much.
And you worked for the U.S. Postal Service as a postal clerk for 10 years, 1956 to 1966.
Right. Well, I worked the first 5 years. I worked as a carrier, a letter carrier, and then I changed over to postal clerk and went inside the post office and worked as a clerk, doing clerk work, type work.
During the 50s, 54 through 66, did you experience any of the racial strife that Nashville had during that time?
You mean after the military or before?
Yes, sir. After you returned from the military.
Oh, yes, after I returned from the military. And I didn't think much about it at that time. But I left on a segregated bus, and when I came home, when I got off the Greyhound bus to come home, the buses were still segregated. And I told somebody later on, I hadn't made much progress. And then in the serious note, and I do get serious at times, that I was disappointed. I thought, I had served my country and sincerely, and I thought that times would have changed. But there was still segregation when I came back. And
well, you had every reason to believe times had changed, because for 2 years you worked and lived in an integrated environment.
That's
to
true.
return to a segregated environment in your home.
That's true. In the military, for the first time, I lived in an integrated society. I mean, I went to the post exchanges and all the recreational facilities and all. And then when I came back home, it was just like I left it. It was back to the segregated society.
Brown versus Board of Education was a landmark case in 1954.
Yes, it was.
As a young man, you were only 22, 23 years old. Were you aware of that landmark case and the importance of what may follow?
I was aware of it, but I thought at the time that it only applied to education. It wasn't until sometime later, I think in another decision, maybe more than one decision, that it applied to other parts of society as well. And of course, I was happy about it. I didn't realize, though at the time, because having been in the military, you followed orders, and no matter what the order was, you followed it and you didn't question it. But the disappointing thing that I learned or saw or experienced was that the people disobeyed the court decision, and without any kind of excuses, just said, we're not going to follow it. And I was disappointed about that, because I thought the courts, once the court said something, gave the order, that the citizens would automatically respect the court decision.
The Tennessee education system started integrating, my recollection, is in the mid-60s, 65 or 66. There were sit-ins in Nashville prior to that, the late 50s and early 60s. As a young man and a working man in the Nashville area, what were your experiences?
Well, I was employed at the post office, and of course, being a government employee, federal employee, I didn't think that I could participate in demonstrations and things like that. But I was in support of peaceful demonstrations because I didn't know any other way that total integration or some integration could be accomplished. And then I was in law school, my first year of law school. I can recall one night that the instructor came to us, meaning two other blacks in the class, and told us that we could go home if we wanted to because the police and the demonstrators were into it outside of the school, and we didn't have class. We were at the windows. The bottles were being thrown, and there were people who had gotten involved in it with the demonstrations who were not a part of the demonstrators, but they were just rabble-rousers, and they had created a lot of trouble outside because we didn't go home because I said no because of the disorder outside. It was safer at school, and it was on this old YMCA building on 7th and Union. It was safer at that point in the school than going out in the street and try to go to your car. But it was, I thought about it, and I thought about whether it would be best for me to stay in law school and become a lawyer than to go outside and participate in the demonstrations and get in trouble that way and not go to school. I tried to balance, see what was the best. And I determined that it was best for me to stay in school and do as I was doing. And wherever I could encourage others, then I did that.
That's an important subject, and with your permission, I'd like to develop that much more thoroughly in a few moments, but let's move back to 1960. This is a very important year in your life. I believe this is the year you're still working for the Postal Service, and you first meet the lovely lady, and you first consider going to law school. Tell me about 1960.
In 1960, I met my wife, and when I met her, I had already applied to law school the first time, and I told her about it, and we discussed it briefly, but I told her what my plans were, and she didn't object to what I was doing. So I continued to pursue trying to be admitted to law school. That was an important time. Then, of course, we had a son born later, and because then we had a baby in the house, and I was going to law school. My wife was teaching school then, and so we were busy people.
No question about that. Well, in 1960, you meet your wife. A friend says, "I've got somebody I want you to meet." You call her, and you meet her and realize you've already met her before.
I hadn't personally met her. I realized that I had been seeing her on the street because I was a letter carrier, postman, and I delivered mail in that neighborhood. So she was in college at that point, and I remember seeing her all the time, and I remember admiring her too. But I didn't know her name. I'd never met her.
Well, you meet her, and you start dating a little bit, and I trust she's as fond of you as you are of her. You date for what, approximately a year or more?
Almost about a year,
Very
and
good.
then we married.
Excellent. Where did you marry?
We married here in Nashville. We married at her uncle's home, and she was living with her uncle while she was going to school,
Wonderful.
and while she was teaching too.
And that was what day that you married?
That was August 20th, 1961.
You better get that right.
That's
She's
right.
going to watch this tape.
That's right.
And that's 1961, and that means that you have been married, 41 years now?
That's
going
right.
on 42.
Going on 42.
Have you behaved all of these 41 years, or has she had to straighten you up every now and
I
then?
tried to behave.
I bet. She's a lovely lady. I've met her several times.
Well, thank you.
And your son, when was he born?
He was born in 1962, August 29th.
Wonderful. All right. And the two of you have one child.
We have one child.
Very
yes.
good. All right. Well, let's go back to 1960 when you met her. You're working at the Postal Service, and for some reason you think, I might apply to law school. Tell us about that.
I thought for about 3 or 4 years before I actually got in law school that I wanted to change careers. I decided that I wanted to do something else at a different level, and I thought I had some talents that I were not using, and so I started looking for something that I would be satisfied with the remainder of my life, and law was what I chose. And the reason, I guess, I was active in community activities, American Legion, and some of the other civic groups, and they had resolutions and they drafted legislation, they supported legislation, things like that, and I got interested in it, in reading it, and helped drafting different things, and the law sort of came to me, that the idea rather, and it was something I thought I would like, and I can remember the first time I picked up a law book. I talked with a lawyer, and he let me have a torts book, and that's a book, about civil law, and I had to put it down. It was so interesting to me, and from that point on, I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
I think you saw an ad in the newspaper
For law
about
school.
apply to the YMCA's night law school.
That's right. I was reading the newspaper, and I saw this advertisement of announcing the opening of the term, new year rather, of the Nashville YMCA Night Law School. That's what it was called then. And they gave the date and the time, some directions. And that's how I got to that law school.
So it's 1960, probably the late spring or early summer, and you mail in, I believe, $10 and your application.
That's right.
To the school, and the dean at the time is J.G. Lackey.
That's correct.
When do you hear back from the school about your application in 1960?
Well, I didn't hear from the school, and when I thought about it again after I'd submitted my application, I said to myself, it's August, and if I'm going to school, I need to hear something soon. And I waited maybe after I thought about that, waited another week or so, and then I went to the Dean Lackey's office. He was the dean of law school, to ask him about it. And when I went to his office and introduced myself, he said, "Oh yes, I have your application right here on the desk." Said I was getting ready to mail it to you, but since you're here, I just give it to you. So he handed me the application with the money order, $10 money order, and said, "We don't accept blacks at this school." And he said, "Who sent you here?" I said, "Well, no one sent me here. I saw the ad in the newspaper." He said, well, we're not going to be the first school, law school, to admit blacks. And he said, I'm not saying we're never going to admit blacks, but I'm saying we're not going to admit blacks now. And so then I told him that I would apply again.
Did he respond to that statement?
No, he didn't. He didn't respond to that.
What were your feelings about the statement, we don't accept blacks and we're not going to be the first school that does?
Well, afterwards, I began to think about it, seriously think about it. And it was real confusing to me. I never did really get it, justify his position. I mean, I never thought that his position was one that was proper, because I started examining myself. I thought then that I started saying, well, you know, what have you done? And then having done that, I said, well, you know, I've tried to obey the laws. I said this to myself. I've tried to pay my taxes. I went to the military during the time of war, answered the draft. And I said to myself, I don't know what else I could do to be considered qualified to, you know, to go to law school, because he never got to the academic part of it. He never said that, and he just went on based of color only. So what I did then was just dismiss the idea. And I guess it's probably because of my upbringing. I'd never been taught to hate people. And strangely enough, now, and I don't understand it, is that I was not angry. Now, I wasn't angry then, and I've never been angry about it. I just thought about it and just was puzzled as to why he would have that, or school would have that attitude.
A year later, what do you do?
Well, a year later, I got another application, got another $10 money order, and mailed it in.
And what do you hear from the school?
Well, in August again, I got a telephone call that time from Dean Lackey, who said, said that they have decided not to admit you to the law school again. And he didn't explain anything else. And I said to him, well, thank you for calling me, and I plan to apply again.
Did he respond to that?
No, he didn't respond to it.
What are your feelings this time? You've been rejected twice.
Well, I thought then that I was going to have to choose another career, because it was getting to the point where this was beginning to be a little old, applying and being denied. Then I thought later on, I'll try one more time. So I went through the same process, got another application, sent the fee in.
This is the spring of 1962.
It's in 1962, the summer, 1960. Well, maybe the spring, because I sent it in early, but I didn't hear from him until it was the summer of '62, and I decided to go to his office. And as I was going in the office, he was coming out, and he knew what I was coming for. He said, "I'm not trying to avoid," just said, I have another appointment, and said, "But I want you to go to see Mr. Chris Huff. Talk to him about it." He said, "Well, I knew from the advertisements Chris Huff's name was on something, and I knew he was affiliated with the school. He held an office. Well, it turned out he was the secretary of the school, and I talked to him, told me where his office was, and I went to his office and spoke with him, and he talked about me being admitted, and I don't recall all the conversation, but it was like, well, submit some documents. I can't remember what the documents were, but he didn't say I was going to be admitted. So then I followed his instructions, and shortly thereafter I got a call from Mrs. Huff, his wife, early one morning, about 7 o'clock. And she said, "Irvin, we're going to admit you to the law school." And then she began to tell me give me directions of what I should do prior to that time.
What went through your mind when she said, "We're admitting you to the law school"?
Sort of a blank feeling. I didn't have any thoughts about it. It was sort of hard to believe. And then I told my wife about it. Of course, she was there in the house. And from that time on, because the rest of it is history, I guess.
I would assume you look at it as another locked door has been unlocked and opened, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be an easy walk after you get through that door.
No, I heard, I didn't get a lot of encouragement from people. Some people honestly thought that I would never graduate. They thought that some people would just get after me and not let me graduate. I didn't believe that. I just couldn't believe that anyone would purposely attempt to prevent me from graduating. And I didn't go in school with that fear at all. I didn't think there was anybody there that would do that, and they didn't.
In 1962, do you know if Vanderbilt Law School was integrated?
I think so. I think I heard this, that there were two students there. One was from Tennessee State. His name was name's Work from Fisk. He was related to the professor at Fisk, music professor at Fisk. And there was another student from Tennessee State, and they went to Vanderbilt Law School together, but it wasn't made public until I think they about ready to graduate, and then it was made public that they were there.
Your freshman law school class, how many are in the class and how many look like Irvin Kilcrease?
Two more. It was when I got there, well, first class night, there were two other blacks there. One was Thomas Smith, lived in Shelbyville, Tennessee, and the other one was, last name was Allison, and he worked for Metropolitan Government as a deputy tax assessor. He left school after the second year, I think it was. Smith stayed on, and the two of us graduated on time.
How many total students started with you the first week of law school?
I'm told that there were about 90 or more students.
How many of the 90 graduated?
18.
Did they tell you when they said, Irvin, we're going to admit you to our law school, that your chances might be 1 out of 10 that you'll graduate?
No, and I'm glad they didn't. That would have frightened me.
What was your law school career like?
The first year was tough. It was hard year. And of course, I had no associates other than, of course, the two other blacks who were there. I didn't know them prior to coming to school, and we were, like I said, a class of about 90, I guess, and they were at one place in the school, and I was somewhere else. And of course, we were all working people, and I never had any association with anybody else in the school.
You were on your own.
I was on my own. I was never invited to join any of the study groups. The whole 4 years I was there.
Were there any professors in your first or second year that were inspirational for you?
Well, the professors never did in the first year class talked to me. And I'm saying me, I don't know if they talked to anybody else, but they never did. So I didn't, but I think maybe the third year, the second year, and the third year, there were two professors that I recall that were, who did talk to me from different times. And it was encouragement. They gave me encouragement.
Do you recall their names?
Well, one was Harold Bigham, who also taught at Vanderbilt Law School. And I think he may have been the only one. I think
Yeah,
I thought it was two. He may have been the only one who actually said something to me outside of class. That's what I mean. That's what I'm speaking of.
Supportive.
Outside of class, yeah, he was
a welcome of sorts.
Right, he was supportive. Okay. Another one of my teachers too, I might add, that I thought was, I can't recall how much conversation I had with him, but he was a good teacher and I thought was friendly and cordial. Was Leroy Ellis. He's still a member of the bar, practicing lawyer. And there may be one or two others, and I hate to name names because I think I may leave out somebody, but there could have been one or two other professors that I actually spoke with outside of a class setting.
Previously, when you and I spoke, you indicated that you don't know for sure, but you think during the second and third attempts at getting into the law school that some members of the legal community may have been privately supporting you or supporting the integration of the school.
Well, I think there were members of the bar who were supporting me to be admitted. And I say that because I spoke with several during the 3-year period, and they were always receptive, but they never told me that they supported one way or the other. They didn't tell me what their position was. But I sort of thought that they did support me, and that, and I thought of them as professionals, that a lawyer would almost have to support me. That's what lawyering is about. You know, rights of people, defending rights, and all the rights, most of the rights that we have now, lawyers obtain those rights for us. So I thought, I didn't know that much about the law then, but I thought a lawyer would almost have to agree that I should have been admitted, provided I was otherwise qualified. I wasn't trying to, if he had told me something else about academically being not qualified, I would have walked away. I would have never tried to apply again. But when he told me exactly why I was being denied admission, then that's what kept me going. But yes, I think there's some people, and I don't want to start calling names because I really don't know. I just think some of the ones I talked with supported me and also caused the school to integrate.
It sounds like you feel you may have had a guardian angel, you just don't know who it was.
That's right, I sure do.
All right, you're moving toward graduation from law school. Tell me what's happening now in your life.
When I graduated from law school?
Yes, sir.
Well, I was still working the post office when I graduated, and one of my classmates told me about some job openings at the Veterans Administration, U.S. Veterans Administration, the federal courthouse, just across the street from the post office, and they were hiring lawyers. And you didn't have to have a law license, but you had to have had to be a law graduate. That's the way I understood it. So I went there and I got a job there, and I just transferred really. I was already in the federal system. So I worked there as a claims examiner for about 18 months. And then I resigned and went into private practice.
Who did you practice with originally?
Mose Davey. He's been around a long time.
What was that like?
Well, it wasn't a partnership. I didn't work for him. He just gave me a place to hang my hat, so to speak, and let me practice out of his office on my own. And it's very helpful that he was there. He's a friend. And as a young lawyer, opening an office, it's awful. I wouldn't advise anybody to do it by themselves. But he was very helpful. And that's where I got my start. And I owe him a debt of gratitude to this day. And later, he was contacted by the public defender, Metro Public Defender, about a part-time public defender's job. And he didn't want the job, and he recommended me for it, and I got it, which was a plus. That's where I learned how to try cases in court.
How long did you practice with Mr. Davies before you went to the public defender?
1 year.
And what was that experience like? What type of clients did you represent? What were some of the good experiences and bad experiences and memorable experiences in your legal community that year?
Well, first thing, I didn't make much money. And, but I didn't have many clients, but I did, I guess, probation of wills, and in general sessions court, I did drunk driving cases, almost anything that would come in the door, and they were all small fee type cases. I can remember one time. I can laugh about it now, but a fellow came in my office, and he'd never been there before, of course, and he said he was looking to put a lawyer on retainer. So it sounded great to me. And he said, I'm a professional burglar. And I want a lawyer on retainer so that when I get in jail, that I can call him and he can get me out. He said, now I don't hurt people. I just burglarize homes. Well, needless to say, I had to turn him down. I told him I thanked him, but no thanks. I couldn't be in that kind of arrangement.
That's pretty brave for a young lawyer who has few clients and a modest income.
That's right.
What would be a typical fee your first couple of months? A client comes to see you. Is it $500, $200, $100?
Probably $100 to $250 was the average fee I was getting then.
Did you have
sometimes less, and sometimes not any fee, because sometimes people were not able to pay.
Do you have a memorable client that was just one of those that you just shake your head about to this day, about either the client was unusual or the issue was unusual that first year?
I can't really think about it. Most of my clients were unusual, and I thought afterwards, looking back, that they sought out an inexperienced lawyer because of their cases. The quality of their cases were low, and the other lawyers either would charge too much or not take the case at all. So they would, I think some came to me on that basis. I can't think of any one client that was, when I was in private practice. Now, when I was in the public defender's office, because that's another story.
Would it be fair for me to infer from that statement that you did not prevail on many of your cases that first year?
Well, that's true. I lost cases because, well, they were bad cases to start with, and I did the best I could with them. But after a while, I began to win a few, and that was very encouraging.
Who was the first judge you made an in-court appearance before, representing a client?
Judge Vincent Trimble.
Would that have been a domestic case?
That was a domestic case. It was a case, and I will forget it. It had to do with separate maintenance pending a divorce. And I didn't win it, but I got it continued to another date, and while we were waiting the hearing, the parties are reconciled.
So you saved a marriage by getting a continuance.
Saved a marriage.
Any other case or court appearance that first year that's memorable?
I can't remember other than, I do remember a case, a DUI case that I had, and I ended up winning it because the prosecutor did not know that that the party in the wreck didn't sign the warrant. That's what it was. Didn't sign the warrant, and he thought that the police officer, the arresting officer, signed the warrant, and he did not. So when that came out in court, I moved to dismiss for the lack of a prosecutor, and the case was dismissed. The judge is very upset about it, but he dismissed the case, and my client went away very happy.
Did you leave the courtroom promptly before the judge changed his mind?
I did.
Who was the judge?
Judge Mondelli, on General Session Court bench.
That would have been James Mondelli, the one who's now deceased.
That's right, yes. Mm-hmm.
And his son is now a General Sessions judge.
Yeah, that's correct.
You go to work for the Davidson County Public Defender. Who is the lead public defender?
James Havering.
And what was that like?
Well, I was permitted to have a civil practice in addition to working there. And that was a very busy time for me, trying to do two things. I had an office across the street in the Stallman building for my private practice, and then I had an office in the courthouse for the public defenders work. And I stayed on call all during the day. If I was not trying a case in court, for lineups and arrests and different things, conferring with people, interviewing clients in jail, and then at the same time maintaining my civil practice. But the public defender's office, the work there was interesting work. I did not make much money, but I felt that I was rendering a service. And sometimes the service was not appreciated by the parties involved. Many people thought if they had a paid lawyer that they got a better representation than with a public defender. Of course, that's not always true. It may be true in some instances. But when I was in the public defender's office, that was not the case. We were told that if a person wanted a trial, that you would give that person a trial. You explain the case to the person, what the pros and cons, but if they insisted on a trial, that's what you did. So you just didn't plea bargain cases just for the sake of plea bargain. You plea bargain cases if it benefited the client.
Did you have a number of jury trials during this experience?
I did. I had a number of jury trials. And if I had to give credit to any job for whatever type of trial lawyer I was during that time, it would have to be the public defender's office, because that's where I learned trial skills.
You were with this office in 1969 to 1972.
That's correct.
Did you believe that your clients were treated fairly during that time with you as their attorney? Obviously, this is not a reflection on you, but upon the juries and the judges.
Most of the time, I think they were. But there were times I thought that they were not treated fairly. And the reason is that the money was not available to prepare for trial. For instance, if it was a murder case and you needed a ballistics expert, or if you need some person to come in to give for blood testimony about blood examination or something of that nature, you could not afford to, they couldn't afford it. So you go into court with what you had. And so for that reason, I think that sometimes that my clients were not treated fairly because they were not given the same amount of money or the same support that the prosecution had. And I don't know how that works today, but generally in trying a case, a lawyer needs everything it takes to win the case. And the money was just not, during those days, the money for the public defender was not available. And one reason it wasn't available because it was not politically correct to fund the public defender, because people normally don't like law violators. And they think that they thought, the sense was, I gathered, was that you shouldn't spend that money on criminals.
The grand jury wouldn't have indicted them if they weren't guilty.
That's true. Everybody was guilty. They was arrested, was guilty. So it was up to the public defender to try to defend the defendant with limited resources.
In 1972, do you leave the public defender's office and go back into full-time private practice?
No, in 1972, I left the public defender's office and went to the United States Attorney's office.
I know I've skipped over an important time in your life, and you're correct. In 1969 to 72, after working with Mr. Davey, did you have a partnership with two other lawyers?
Oh, I did. I left Mr. Davey's office, and I was associated with Carlton Pedway and John Archibald. And
the name of the firm was Petway, Kilcrease, and Archibald.
Yes. What
was that experience like?
It was a good experience. I enjoyed practicing law with those two lawyers. They practiced both criminal and civil, and I practiced civil there because I was still in public defender's office, and so that was a good relationship. And then I stayed there until I was appointed Assistant United States Attorney.
Were they your contemporaries, unlike Mr. Davies, who I believe was an elder gentleman?
No, they were younger people, and I guess young lawyers slightly different from older lawyers. But we enjoyed it, and we were friends, and we got along well.
Do you have any experiences that you would like to share with us concerning Mr. Petway or Mr. Archibald and your work with them?
I tried cases with Petway. Sometimes he would ask me to join cases, to help him with cases, and he was an excellent trial lawyer, and I always enjoyed trying cases with him. I didn't try cases with Archibald, but he was a nice person too.
All right. 1972, you're offered an opportunity with the United States Attorney's Office. How did that come about?
About 4 years before 1972, the United States Attorney changed because of the change in the president, and I sent a letter to the United States Attorney, the incoming, just like an application, and I got a letter back. It was just a form letter, saying we'll keep your name on file. So I thought, well, he's not interested in employing me, and I just forgot about it. And then one day I got a call. There was a call from him, and I thought he was calling me about some cases I had pending, because I did have some cases pending in federal court. But when I returned his call, he said he offered me a job there, and said, and I just sort of paused because I wasn't thinking about it. And he asked me if I would come down and see him right away. So I did, and he told me that he had done all the background work and on me, and he wanted to hire me. And the only thing I had to do was to pass the FBI background check and get the job.
Who is this?
Charles Anderson.
How long did it take you to say yes?
Well, I told him I'd have to think about it, and he said, well, he was really rushing me, wanted me to tell him something right away, and with the office, I was on a lease, my office, and so I had a lot of things to think about and talk about with other people. And I think I let him in about maybe a week, told him that I would accept the job. And then, of course, I had to go through the FBI background check, and so I ended up starting to work in July of 1972.
What type of cases do you handle at first?
At first, I handled all criminal cases, mostly illegal drugs, bank robberies, stolen treasury checks, and there were some other crimes, stolen automobiles across state lines, but that was generally what I was doing for quite a while. And I said quite a while, maybe for the first 4 years I was there. I guess my caseload was about 90% criminal. And I did almost all kinds of criminal cases that you can think about. I mean, not think about, but cases listed in the code.
I trust that you are more fully funded as a prosecutor for the United States government than a Metro Public Defender.
Oh yes, I couldn't believe the resources I had when I became a prosecutor. Anything that I needed to try a case, the whole time I was there, I was never refused. If I asked for whatever kind of expert, whatever kind of examination I needed of evidence, whatever the resource was, because I had to write it up. I just couldn't ask for it. I had to justify it by a memorandum, but I can't remember ever being refused.
Did it take you a while to adjust from the I don't have any resources versus whatever I can justify to ask for?
It didn't take me long. It made trial preparation much easier.
The first few years, you were with that office for 8 years. The first few years as a young whippersnapper U.S. attorney assistant, what were some of the more interesting or unique cases that you had?
I think the illegal drug violations, and that had to do with prescriptions, doctors writing prescriptions without medical reason, drug trafficking across state lines. I think that subject, and it was a lot to it, was probably more interesting, and also it required more work and more thought in it. The people who were violating the law, most of them were well financed. I mean, they could hire the best lawyers to defend them, and the cases were larger because you crossed state lines in many instances. I did that. I spent more time doing drug violations, I think, than anything else. Because I also did bank robberies. Bank robberies back in those days, there were a lot of them in Nashville, in Middle Tennessee, and of course we covered 35 counties. So there were a lot of bank robbery cases. There were stolen car rings, stolen property rings, cases like that. They required a lot of work, a lot of investigations by the various agencies, the FBI, and, Secret Service, the Drug Enforcement Agency. So we handled cases for all of those different investigated by all of those different agencies.
If you can break them down into two groups, who are some of the more accomplished lawyers that you went up against, and who are some of the more confrontational and difficult and challenging lawyers that you went up against while a U.S. attorney?
Well, I won't say the ones confrontational, more confrontational than others, but I would say defense lawyers as a whole, and I respect them because I was a defense lawyer too, criminal defense lawyer, and they're tough, and most of them that I tried cases against were very competent lawyers and really represent their clients. And there were a few. Sometimes you would have some lawyer coming in the court for the first time. You have that, and obviously you would have some problems with the lawyer because one reason you wouldn't want the case to be reversed because an inexperienced lawyer making mistakes, and many times if I saw that, I would try to help the lawyer as much as I could, not to make the errors.
In other words, you would help them enough to avoid a reversal, but
Yeah,
not so much as
right.
to win the case.
I wouldn't give my case away.
Right.
But I would help them. For instance, if they didn't ask for discovery, I'd give them discovery because I always felt as a prosecutor that I didn't have anything to hide. I always felt that I should not bring a case that I couldn't win. And I shouldn't prosecute someone that should not be prosecuted. So if I had an indictment, and by the way, I followed the case from arrest all the way through the grand jury. I appeared before the grand jury, presented the case along with the agent, the grand jury, so I knew the case. So if a person should not be prosecuted, I would ask the U.S. attorney, I'd tell the U.S. attorney about it and suggest that we not bring the case. Because I don't think, and I seriously believe that a prosecutor's job is not to convict so much as it is to see the justice is done.
Did the U.S. attorney, the local attorney, change during your 8 years?
Yes.
Who else did you
The
work
president was changed, and Hal Harding became the next U.S. attorney I worked under. And the peculiar thing about that was that when I was a assistant public defender, Hal Harding was assistant district attorney, and we were assigned to the same courts. So we tried cases against each other. And for the time I was there, and then he came to the U.S. Attorney's office. So we always joked about it because I tell the young lawyers in the office, I said, see, you better be careful how you treat people because you don't know where you'll meet them next. And but one thing we always said too, that the whole time that we were trying cases, Hal Harding and myself were trying cases on either side, we never did have any disputes. If he told me something, I didn't ask for him to put it in writing. If I told him something, he didn't ask me to put it in writing. And if we stood up in court and said something and it wasn't exactly correct, I knew it wasn't on purpose. We'd correct it. And that was the relationship we had all those years, not only with Hal Harding as a prosecutor, but I had the same relationship with some of the other prosecutors in the office.
And the relationship you're talking about was while you and Hal Harding were adversaries.
Yes, well, we were adversaries.
That is immense respect for each other. That is the way it ought to be.
We tried cases just as hard as we could try them, but then we had a lot of respect for each other.
Did you enjoy the time that you worked with Hal Harding in the U.S. Attorney's office?
I did. He promoted me while he was there, he divided, the office was in a criminal section and a civil section. After I was there 4 years, I'd been doing, as I said before, about 95% criminal prosecutions. He made me chief of the civil section in the office, and while he was there, and I stayed in that position until I came to the bench, which was very helpful.
Can you recall a particular, perhaps infamous or notorious case that you were responsible for during or involved in during your 8 years with the U.S. Attorney?
There's one case that comes to mind, and I tried this case with Hal Harding. He was a lead counsel on the case. It was a kidnapping case that where the kidnappers were escapees from an Atlanta federal prison. They kidnapped a person in Kentucky, brought him across Tennessee, committed a crime in North Carolina. Then they went to Florida and committed another crime by assaulting an officer, security officer. And the U.S. attorneys in these states agreed through the Department of Justice that we would try the case here in Nashville. And Hal Harding and I tried that case, and both of those people were convicted. As I recall, one received a sentence of 91 years, which was sort of unusual in the federal court.
With that, let's pause briefly, and we'll come back with your judicial career.